Hey, what's up, everyone? Thank you so much for joining the Squat University podcast. I'm once again joined by two-time Olympian Chad Vaughn. Today, we're going to be talking about how to blow up your Olympic lifts. There's a very key and magical concept that you can use within your own training to enhance your Olympic lifting that's a little bit different than what you may think. It's not necessarily an assistant exercise that you're going to use in your training in hopes that it will transfer over into better clean and jerks and snatches, but actually a way you can manipulate the variables within your own training. So I'm going to let Chad take it away from
Mhm.
here and yeah, enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. Back in the day, we called these clusters and not clusters in clean into a thruster. That's a movement that a lot of people are familiar with, especially coming from CrossFit, but clusters in that these are clusters of single reps, usually in 5 reps, that you're going to do to really allow yourself to accumulate reps within higher percentages. Higher percentages meaning, you know, somewhere around 75 to 85%, usually maybe a little bit higher than that, but that rep range there where there's a lot of magic to be had in gaining strength within the Olympic lift, specifically the snatch and the clean and jerk, really allowing you to try to transition all the other strength work that you've been doing in squats, deadlifts, presses into the Olympic lifts. And this is a great way to do it. Um, but clusters usually have 5 reps. Now, depending on what percentage you're using, depending on where you're at in the cycle, you can do these. You're going to do them on a clock. So typically, say the first cluster of 5 will be 45 seconds apart or every 45 seconds. Maybe the second cluster for the day will be every minute on the minute. Maybe the third cluster of the day will be every minute and a half. You can do them as little as every 30 seconds. You can do them quicker than that if you want, but then it's going to turn into a double or a set of 5. I've done them up to every 2 minutes. So where this base workout came from for me that I did, I can't even tell you how many times through my career, Aaron, was the workout was 5 singles at 75%. And we'll say 45 seconds or every 45 seconds, take 2 minutes of rest, 80% for 5 singles every minute on the minute, take 2 minutes of rest, and then 85% for 5 singles, we'll say every minute and a half. Take 2 minutes of rest, and then I would do a single every 2 minutes, increasing from 85% as able, usually not going over 95%. Now, if you get those 20 reps in within somewhat of a minimal amount of time, you're in good shape. You are conditioned to the Olympic lifts. You've accumulated a lot of really good, meaningful reps within one workout. And here's the thing, though, you've got to progress into that level of workout. So, a lot of times when I use this in my programming, I'll start with 70% or even 65% and only do 2 clusters. And then through weeks, we'll progress up in weight. We'll also manipulate the amount of rest that the athlete is getting between those reps, maybe even between those clusters. So maybe we'll do 3 minutes or 5 minutes in between those clusters of 5. So there's a lot of different ways that you can manipulate it, but it's all about transitioning the strength work that you've been doing into the Olympic lift, specifically conditioning you for the Olympic lifts. We get so used to doing 1 rep and then resting 3 to 5 minutes, 1 rep resting 3 to 5 minutes. We got to be able to change those types of things up to be, there is conditioning that is needed in Olympic lifting. And specifically, if you're a competitor, you need to be doing clusters to prepare yourself for having to follow yourself potentially in competition where you only get around about 2 minutes of rest. You don't want to be only used to doing your heavy singles and resting 3 to 5 minutes because it's not realistic that it's always going to work out that way. But another thing that I really like about this, whether you're doing 1 cluster of 5 for the day or 2 or 3 or 4 clusters of 5 for the day, it's something that will help you learn to focus better as well. So it's going to help you mentally, toughen you mentally and physically, again, for the benefit of your Olympic lifts in training, for the benefit of your Olympic lifts in competition. When you can get through these clusters and you can be consistent, you're making most of those reps, meaning I don't want to see you missing any more than 2. And if you do, then we'll kind of shut it down. Maybe do a light down set and call it a day. But when you develop the ability to make all or most of your reps when you're doing clusters, um, you've learned, or you're learning the ability to turn your focus on and off. You're not going to sit there and stay focused for all of those 20 reps. If you're doing 20 clusters, you got to be able to shut it down, rest your mind as well, think about something else, honestly, and then snap your finger and turn it back on when you're on that clock and going into them quickly. So that's another powerful benefit that I like. Now, again, think of it as starting with only one or two clusters at 65 or 70%, then maybe the second cluster is 70 or 75%, and then progressing up in weight as you go through weeks, progressing, changing up uh, the amount of time. One way that I would do them is I would do the 75, 80, and 85% clusters on, say, week one. And then the next week, I would do the same percentages, lessen the amount of time on those clusters, shorten the amount of time of rest that I had on each of those clusters. And then I would add 5 extra reps on the second week. So 75 for 5, 80 for 5, 85 for 5. And then on that second week, I would go something like 87, 89, increasing that weight on that last cluster of 5. And then on the third week, I'll rest. I'll just stay away from clusters. I'll do some lighter reps, and then I'll come back to them again if I'm going to do a second phase of them. Usually not going to stay with them in any cycle for any longer than 2 phases, meaning week 1, week 2, rest week 3, and then on week 4, week 5, I'm doing clusters again, and then week 6, I'm resting from them.
So the big thing that I really enjoy about clusters and that I found, and from a scientific standpoint, I think people can appreciate this if they're coming from an exercise science background or a coaching background, is clusters really help you enhance your technique capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Because we already have, by the time you started to do clusters, you usually have a certain set level of technical quality that you've built up to. And at that time, now all of a sudden, we're starting to stress your technique under fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're not having you do so much repetition in a row, like 5 singles at 80% with a clean and jerk. That's ridiculous. And no one in Olympic lifting does that because there's so much fatigue that your body would break down to where the 5th rep would look nothing like the first. But the idea is that if we can dose the repetition scheme and the rest periods just enough to where you're fatigued enough,
Mm-hmm.
but you can still challenge your ability
Mm-hmm.
to maintain the same style of movement, the same quality of technique every single rep, you enhance your ability to have that same motor pattern every single time so that when you are under greater fatigue with heavier load, your body sort of knows where to go. So the reason that we do so many repetitions and repetitions and repetitions with Olympic weightlifting is so that not only are you getting stronger from a physiological standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
but you're enhancing your brain body connection for how to perform that movement. So you enhance your technique capacity, also
Mm-hmm.
called a motor pattern, so that when you're under fatigue, your body doesn't have to think, all right, hamstrings turn on, quads turn on, now move my arm. It just does it because you have ingrained this motor pattern for the clean or the snatch so many times. And one of the ways you can make that motor pattern stronger is by pushing yourself with load and fatigue,
Mm-hmm.
but just enough with those variables to where it doesn't become sloppy. So if you have someone that's doing 5 singles at 70% to 75%, the weight's heavy enough to where you're
Mm-hmm.
actually going to be strengthening that motor pattern in a way that carries over to going heavier. Because if you're doing these at 30 to 40%, the weight's not heavy enough. Your body's not actually going to be strengthening that motor pattern because the load is so light in a way that's going to carry over to a 90% clean. So it's just enough, but it's also just enough fatigue because you're also dialing back the rest periods where you're doing one, you're making it
Mm-hmm.
crisp. You're taking a good 45 seconds to a minute to calm down. You're rehearsing mentally what this lift is going to look like in your brain. You get up and you go again. You make it try to make it look perfect. And you get 5 to 6 or sometimes a couple more depending on your coach, but usually
Mm-hmm.
between that 5 to 6 repetitions in that one set, and then you rest for much longer, but if you're going to do another one. But I absolutely love these. And I remember first starting to do them back when I first started competing in 2005 under Alex Cook when I was up at Truman State with the Iron Dogs. And it was always some of the most fun workouts because
Mm-hmm.
it's a challenge when you get up to those heavier percentage clusters,
Mm-hmm.
but still
Yep.
a fun because, you know, you're going to get a lot of this work in a short amount of time but you have the ability to get your breath and then recover and hit it again. So I think it
Yep.
definitely can be a huge way to blow up, I guess we'll say, your Olympic lifts because you're
Right.
challenging yourself to
Yeah.
maintain those perfect lifts at that higher percentage and you get a lot of reps in a short amount of time.
Yeah, there are certain things in Olympic lifting and just in sport in general and life in general that you come across that are magical to me. I've done these for a long enough period of time as an athlete and a coach where it's one of those things in Olympic lifting that I think there's magic to it. There's those magic cues, there's those magic drills, there's those magic exercises or rep schemes that we find, and for me this is one of them. And it's also the basic way that you get stronger no matter what movement that you're doing. You have to get reps in under fatigue. That forces you to turn on more of your body whether you realize it or not, and
Mhm.
that's what allows you to um, develop new pathways in your body and recruit more muscles and stuff like that. So if you get to the point to where you're doing your fifth rep at 85% and you're still making it, that's heavier than 85%. You know what I'm saying? If you get to
Mhm.
the point to where you've done 75, 80, and 85 for five, and then you've built up to 95% on the final 20 rep of the day, if you do the full regular cluster workout that I talked about, you're probably stronger than your 100%, you know. So you've put in the work, and that's very meaningful and telling. And I can remember going through that many times and getting to that 95% and being like, wow, that's, I feel good about myself, you know. So
Yeah. I think another thing to point out as far as someone that may be learning the Olympic lifts, you're still very young and maybe you've only been doing it for a few years or a few months, is cluster reps also give you the chance to really, really focus in on making good quality lifts every
mhm,
single time.
yeah.
Because what happens, and this is more so important for the Olympic lifts because the technical demand is so high. We don't want to see a lot of sloppy reps in training.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes, depending on this is one of the knocks on CrossFit, and obviously it depends on the coaches of who are allowing sloppy reps. But the sloppier your reps are in training, that's going to bleed over to competition.
Mhm,
So within Olympic lifting, the idea is that every single time you touch the bar, we want it to look pristine because that's going to build up that, technical capacity to
mhm,
be able to perform the lifts at a higher percentage or in competition and make it look much better. So you're not usually going to see at an elite level an Olympic lifter do so many repetitions to where their form breaks down to a great
mhm,
degree. It's
mhm,
always, there's more in the tank if they needed it, but they're not doing 30 snatches in a row like a CrossFitter would. So the demands of the sport are much
mhm.
different. So every single rep has to be pristine. So doing a cluster allows just enough rest to where they can go up to the bar and perform another rep and make it look good.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And to the point of clusters, I've absolutely had athletes do much lighter percentages to help them get those reps in that they need, but not to have to do sets of three or sets of five to accumulate the reps that they need at lighter percentages, 50% or 60%, whatever that may be for the individual, or doing a snatch from the hip instead of a snatch from the ground. And just over time, you know, developing that athlete and progressing them into the ability to do full snatches and full clean and jerks with clusters.
Definitely. So, for anyone out there that maybe hasn't been listening to the podcast recently, Chad and I have actually developed our own training programming subscription base that is live right now for those interested in improving their Olympic lifts. And we started it just a couple weeks ago. So, what we're going to do right now is I want to talk about sort of what the current program is going on right now, sort of where we're going within the next month for any athletes that are doing that. But also for those of you who may be interested and you're like, hey, I'd love to start learning the Olympic lifts.
Mhm.
I'd love some programming, some coaching tips with that. Chad's also going to explain sort of what you could do if you want to jump in sort of late to this prescription or
Mhm.
subscription program.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited about this subscription plan, and we're talking about what's coming up in the week of February right now, and those are actually weeks 10 through 13 of a 16 week cycle. So fairly late in a cycle. And again, we're talking about what's coming up in February, and I'm looking forward to getting this to the athletes that are on the program currently and have been on the program. But any athletes that might want to jump in, that late in the cycle, we can help you do that. It's not wrong for you to do that. I've had athletes do it many times before. The key is that just make the adjustment to progress into the program so that you ease into it and get the benefit from it. What you can do if you jump into the program at any week is take about 20% off of the indicated percentages. So, for example, there are some clusters indicated in the month of February in our programming. So instead of the first cluster of 75%, yeah, this is taking off a lot, but do it at 55, maybe 60 if you want, but it's not about getting the workout in as it is written yet. It's about getting the reps in, getting used to how the program is set up. Take 20% off. The second week, take 10% off. And then week 3, maybe you can go in and do the written workout as it is, and you're into the program and you're ready to go. You can finish out the cycle with us and then be ready to get the recovery weekend that we'll do, and the intro week that we'll do after that, to lead everyone that's on the Squat U Club into a new fresh cycle at that point. But the month of February, weeks 10 through 13, one of the reasons we talked about clusters today is because there are touches of clusters in the program, and there has been in, so say, week like 8 and 9 leading into week 10, that is the beginning of February. Now, the clusters that we're doing in this cycle, we're only doing 2 clusters in the same day. We're doing them in the snatch and the clean and jerk both, but we're spreading those out through the week. So you'll do snatches one day, for example, maybe that's on a Monday, and then to spread that out as much as we can, you'll do clean and jerk clusters instead of snatch clusters on Friday. So they're spread out. You get plenty of rest and time in between those clusters. Now, for any of you that aren't familiar, this is a 4-day-a-week plan that we have going currently. So be ready for that if you're new and you're jumping into it. Now, week 10 clusters, the first week of February, we're going to use the same percentages as week 9, but like I talked about in the beginning, we're going to lessen the amount of time that you have. So, for example, I can't remember 100%, but I'm pretty sure on the first cluster, snatch cluster, it was a minute, every minute on the minute. And then the second week, we're doing every 45 seconds. So again, we're just progressing, not up and load from week 9 to week 10, but down in the amount of time that you have to rest. Week 11 clusters will be light. So instead of doing 75 and then 80 or 85% on the second cluster, we're only doing 1 cluster at 70%. So backing off a decent amount to give you some rest on that third week from those clusters. All right. That back off was also prep for week 12, where we're going to start doing a lot of by feel. So no more clusters, but a lot of heavier singles, really working on starting to peak for the test that will be at the end of week 16, whether you're in a competition or whether you're just with us. And, most of you that are with us are just on the program, not necessarily for any competition right now. You're just planning to peak and test at the end of week 16. And by the time we get into week 12, now it's time to really turn on that competition phase.
There we go, guys. So this program can be found on trainheroic.com under their marketplace. If you just search Squat U Club, you will find that on the trainheroicmarketplace.com. So again, guys, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I hope you guys got something out of it, especially for those of you who are interested in the Olympic lifts, and for anyone that wants to jump on the live subscription coaching that Chad and I have. Go check that out. And until next month, guys, we'll have another one of these with another tip for your Olympic lifts and an update on the programming for all the athletes that are joining that. We'll see you guys then.